God's work. And there's a very familiar scripture, we all know it, Malachi 3:10, and I'll just quote part of it. It says, "Bring ye all the tithes into the storehouse, that there may be meat in mine house, that there may be meat in my house." So bringing it to church. Bringing it into church so we can provide for the ministry. The second reason, to provide for your family. 1 Timothy 5:8 says, "But if any not provide for his own, and especially those of his own house, he hath denied the faith and is worse than an infidel or an unbeliever." So provide for God's work and provide for your family. The third, management of assets during life. The scripture reference there, Matthew 25, verses 14 through 30. This is the parable of the talents. God gave one, in the parable of the talents, one got 5, one got 2, and one got 1. God knows everybody can't handle the same amount of money, the same amount of talent, the same amount of gifts. God knows that, but he gives it to you according to your ability. So if you can only handle $20,000, God expects you to handle that $20,000. If you can handle $1 million, God will expect you to handle that $1 million. But in the parable about the talents, what we see is that those who were profitable with the talents, God rewarded them. But those who were unprofitable, what happened? God punished them. The last reason is management of assets at death. Proverbs 13:22 says, "A good man leaveth an inheritance to his children's children." A good man leaves an inheritance to his children's children. So not just thinking about now, not just thinking about me. So if we see, the 4 reasons I've noted to have money are to provide for God's work, to provide for your family, management of assets during life, and management of assets at death. Dr. King said, life's most persistent and urgent question is, what are you doing for others? And I mention that because if you think about the reasons we have money, it's not just for us. It's for the church, it's for our family, it's for our children's children. I'm not saying we shouldn't have something for ourselves, but sometimes we think money is just for us. The more I get, the more I will buy, the more I'll get. But money is not just for us. Life's most persistent and urgent question is, what are you doing for others? On our agenda, we're going to be going over statistics. We're going to talk about some goal setting, talk about budgeting, which is so important. We'll look at banking products, banking institutions. We'll talk about using credit, which is so important. We're going to talk a little bit about taxes, especially because we're in the tax season. And we're going to talk about life insurance because, as I said, the reason for money is managing assets after our death. And sometimes we don't think about that. We don't want to think about death. We think, you know, there was a quote, if I think about death, I'm going to die. Well, you know what? We're going to die anyways. If we don't think about death, the people we left behind are going to be in trouble. Let's look at some statistics. 70% of all Americans live paycheck to paycheck. 70%. And sometimes, depending on the community, it's a lot higher than that. About half of credit card owners pay only their minimum monthly payment each month. Did you know that if you had a $1,000 credit card bill at 18% and you paid just $25 a month, it would take you 12 years and 9 months to pay off that bill, just $1,000, just making the minimum monthly payment, 12 years and 9 months. And most people have a lot more than just $1,000 on their credit card bill. That's why it's so important not to just pay your minimum monthly payment, but about half of credit card owners only pay their minimum monthly payment. 4 out of 10 Americans say they live beyond their means. Recently, I believe it was about 2001, more young adults filed for bankruptcy than graduated from college. And 30% of college graduates who borrowed are unable to make their payments. And going to the next page, university administrators say they lose more students to credit card debt than academic failure. So fortunately, they're learning about academics, but they're failing Money Management 101. They're learning about psychology and biology, sociology and communications, but they're failing Money Management 101. About 10 million unbanked Americans don't use mainstream insured financial institutions. They're using payday lenders, check cashing stores, pawn shops, either because they're afraid or because they don't know. And the thing is, using those things, the reason I note that, because usually those fees are a lot higher than insured financial institutions. Cashing checks, I prepare taxes. People don't have banks to cash their checks. They'll pay 3% to cash their refund checks. Sometimes it might be a $3,000 refund check, $4,000, $5,000. If they put it in their bank, got direct deposit, you know what? They wouldn't have to pay to cash that check. But they're paying 3% to cash a $4,000 refund check. And who's that going to? These uninsured financial institutions. And a lot of it is because they don't know, or they're afraid, or because they may have messed up their banking relationship. 1 in 4 million will retire on an income below the poverty level. And as of 2008, the poverty level for a single person, $10,400. 1 in 4 women will retire with an income below $2,400. That comes up to about $866 a month. 1 in 4 women. Now, I calculated that $866 a week would be about $45,000 a year. But 1 in 4 women will be retiring again with that monthly, not weekly. Less than $10,000 a year. 96% of all Americans will retire financially dependent on the government, family, or charity. And the last one, the last statistics, you can have a 6-figure income and a PhD and still have money trouble, still be in money trouble. And the reason I mention that, because a lot of us think the answer to our problems is more money. I'll tell you this, we're talking about choices and change. You can have all the money you want, but if you don't change the way you think about money and change your spending habits, you won't have money. It's not about more money, it's about what you do with the money you have. Because we know years ago, a lot of our grandparents or great-grandparents, they might not have had a lot of money, but they knew how to manage the money. They didn't have credit cards. They knew how to manage money. So it's not what you have. It's good to have money, but if you don't know how to spend it, you might as well not have it. Dr. King said the quality, not the longevity of one's life, is what's important. And I'll tell you, the choices you make can improve the quality of your life. It'd be a lot better to be 80 years old and not to have to worry where your next meal is coming from than to be 65 and always wondering, can I pay the rent or should I pay for my medicine? So the quality of life is more important than the longevity. Sure, it's nice to have a long life, but wouldn't it be nicer not to have to worry about where your meals are coming from, or if you have to make choices between medicine and food? Now let's talk about goals. Very important. How many people here write down goals every year? Or just write down goals? Great, great. We can skip this section. No, we won't. Goals are so important. Goals are like a destination. Like a destination. And obviously, if you don't know where you're going, you're probably not going to get there. In 1979, there was an important study done at Harvard. Very important study. It was done in the graduating MBA class. And what the students were asked were, have you set clear written goals for your future? And in that graduating class, 3% had set clear written goals for their future. 13% had goals, but they weren't written. And 84% didn't have any goals. 10 years later, the 13% were making twice as much as the 84%. The 3% who had clear written goals for their future were making 10 times as much as the 97%. That's why it's so important to write down goals. Like I said, if you don't know where you're going, you're probably not going to get there. I want to make a lot of money. I want to make a lot of money.